In the whole pantheon of DC superheroes, there are three that are held up as sort of the trinity, the top three, the big tent poles without which the DC comic universe doesn't actually work. Of the three of them, Wonder Woman is the hardest to get, and the one that has seen the most adjustments as a character through the years. That's not totally hard to understand. After all, one is Superman. Superman is the big Boy Scout, the one who has the most powers, and who will always find a way to do not just the right thing, but the best possible thing, because that's who the character is. And there's Batman, the orphan, who dedicates his life to fighting crime and uses his brain, because he has no powers, to build just the right contraptions and tools and do just the right detective work to try and do the right thing. Then you have Wonder Woman, only child to the queen of the Olympians, of the Amazons, formed from the soil by the Greek goddess Athena herself and given form and life, which isn't quite fit. She's harder to grasp because, after all, what says understandability to an American audience more than the Greek goddesses? It's a different kind of character. And what else that makes Wonder Woman different is her ability to make hard choices. Wonder Woman, more than Batman and Superman, understands that sometimes you have to make choices in life. And it is making those choices and how she makes them that defines her as a character at her best. And that can be hard to grasp when you're writing, because choice making is hard, is it not? Making choices requires us to go through thought processes in real life, and it's no different for the character of Wonder Woman. Superman has enough power to always just save the day. Batman has enough thinking ahead that we just assume he always has a next step plan. But Wonder Woman is the character amongst the big three of the DC universe who has to make those choices and whom we're allowed to see grappling with those choices. It's hard to grasp as a writer. Even I missed it in my first draft of this sermon. I could show it to you sometime if you want. I have it mostly done. And it's, some of the pieces are in this one, but I didn't even, writing it until I got to the end, fully grasp who Wonder Woman was as a character and what I wanted to say about her. But you see, what sets Wonder Woman apart is not the Greek gods, although they have been a playful part of her story and have often used to great effect in comics. It's not her all-female family, the Amazons, of course, being an island of muscular warrior women and no men. It's not even her willingness to be a warrior at times, although that is certainly a part of her character that is definitional to her and different from Batman and Superman. But what sets her apart, at her heart, at her root as a character, is her ability to love. Wonder Woman is a character created to be a bit of a feminist icon. And her story is a person sent from the Amazons to show man's world, that would be us, a different way of being, a way of peace through strength, but also a way of love. And that is that ability to love that makes Wonder Woman so special as a character. I talked about Wonder Woman as a character who makes choices, whom we're allowed to watch grapple with those choices. But those choices ultimately come down to love. Her love for her friends, her love for humankind. And she's willing to make sacrifices to live into that love, willing to make the hard choices to live into that love, sometimes even willing to make a choice she knows her friends will disagree with, that her friends will be angry at her for, to live into that love. There was one comic book story that I read when I was in seminary, so it's not that old, but it's been, a good 10 plus years now. And in it, Wonder Woman makes a decision to save Superman, to save her friend, who has been mind controlled into causing damage and is about to commit murder because of the mind control on him. He thinks he's fighting a supervillain, but it's not. Wonder Woman does what she has to do to stop the one mind controlling Superman. But the choice she makes is not one that her friends agree with, and they're angry with her about it. And pointing back, the strain and the strife of that choice is a part of the storytelling in DC Comics for several more months after this one moment. But it's a choice she makes anyway, because of the love she has for her friend. Because she is the character who can make the hard choices out of love. Another scene. This was from the movie that came out recently, which is why Wonder Woman got chose to be part of this series, because she's a movie that's just out. I meant to see it, but I didn't quite get it seen, but I watched this scene. It's online on YouTube. And in this scene, Wonder Woman is trying to rescue a village during World War I that has been captured by the movie's supervillain. And unfortunately, the supervillain has convinced the Germans to support him, and so it's World War I. The Germans on one side and the American allies on the other side, and there's trenches, and there's a big space of deadly land called no man's land, and the villagers are closer to that side, where the villain is, and the Germans are, and the Americans can't get there to rescue the village. Until Wonder Woman has had enough. She's been in disguise. She's been disguised so people wouldn't see who she was as she tried to understand this war. She decides that she needs to do something. She takes off the disguise, revealing her full Wonder Woman garb, which is yet another costume. And she climbs the trench and crosses no man's land, taking and drawing fire onto her so that her friends can go and rescue that village and defeat the movie's villain. It's a moment of love. Love for those villagers she had never met before, but whom that she knew were worthy of her love. And she was willing to make a sacrifice. Now, she's the hero of the movie, and a superhero movie at that, so she survives. But you don't cross no man's land in World War I and survive very often. It was a moment of self-sacrifice made out of love, to take the risk of no man's land to save people she had never met. It's a powerful moment of love, and a pretty good action sequence, if you like blockbuster action sequences as it goes. It's that kind of love that Christ calls us to this morning. In our first reading, Jesus is asked what is the greatest commandment. And he says it's to love God with our whole selves. But then he says we're to love our neighbors as well. Because you see, for Jesus, loving God means loving neighbor, and loving our neighbor is how we love God. The two are connected. We don't love our neighbor because they've done something to deserve it, because we say, yes, you are amazing and wonderful, so I will give you my love. We don't love our neighbor because they're nice people or kind or welcoming. We love our neighbor because they are children of God, made in the image of our Creator. And if we love that Creator, we are called to love all made in God's image, just as they are. It's the kind of love one shows, and is the kind of love we're called to do. And that can require sacrifice. Can we give up eating out once a month to donate to the Lord's cupboard? Can we spend a few hours a week researching issues affecting the least of these in our country and the most vulnerable, and then tell our lawmakers what we've found and that we'll be watching? Are we willing to let go of a little of our power and privilege in order to bring about in this nation, in this world, the dream of justice and righteousness and shalom that God has for creation? Are we able to have the hard conversations about the systems we live in our country and our world, systems of racism, sexism, homophobia, and others? Can we truly listen to those affected by those systems and understand both our part and how we can make a difference? Those are the sacrifices that come with loving our neighbor. And they're hard. Make no mistake. They're easy to write, but they're hard to live. But we're called to them. The sacrifices that we can do. Loving our neighbor requires sharing. Requires sharing of ourselves, of being willing to reach out to those around us and connect to them. To smile at people on the street. To greet, whether or not we're going to give money, to greet those who are homeless. To understand people's stories and listen to what truly makes them tick. And listen to their struggles and their joys. Loving our neighbor requires sharing of ourselves. And it requires sharing of our resources. Using the gifts we have for the work of this church in the world, for the work of other places in the world, for giving to the Lord's cupboard and other places, to support those who are neighbors who need what we have to share. All of these and more are ways that we love our neighbor, that we love God by loving our neighbor. That's who we are. So we're called to do who we're called to be. None of us may ever dress up in fancy costumes and go fight supervillains. Thankfully, the villains are as fictional as Wonder Woman herself. But we all have our own roles to play. We're not all called to be heroes, and we're not going to have to cross no man's land. But we are called to make a difference. To seek to love God by loving our neighbors in all that we do, even when it requires self-sacrifice. We are called to be people who love like Wonder Woman, who love